Section 23 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Book 3, The Comparative Powers. Chapter 1, Office of the Comparative Powers. Hitherto, every mental perception or apprehension coming before us has been singular. All objects observed by the senses, external and internal, have been unconnected. These, when reproduced by the memory, and even by the imagination, are still units. By the latter of these powers we may join the tail of a fish to the body of a woman, but the mermaid thus fashioned is quite as individual a thing as the woman or the fish in our idea of it. We are now to consider the mental power which notices the relations of objects, and thus binds them in our apprehension. It may be called comparison, and is defined as the faculty which discovers relations. It observes first the relations of objects given by the simple cognitive and reproductive powers, and then goes on to observe relations between these, on and on, to an indefinite extent. It can notice the relation of classes to classes, and pursue effect on to cause, and a cause on to a prior cause, and so with all other relations. 1. The discovery of relations proceeds on a knowledge of the objects related. Even as the objects perceived to be related are real, so are also the relations perceived. I lay down this proposition in opposition to one of the sceptical doctrines of the present day. There are metaphysicians who tell us that things themselves are unknown to us, and that we perceive only the relations of things. This makes the relations perceived subjective, that is, merely in the mind. In standing up for the veracity of our cognitive faculties and the reality of things, we should set aside both these positions and maintain that the things perceived and the relations perceived between them are both real. No doubt the reality of the two is somewhat different, the reality of substances and the reality of the relation of substances. But as the substances, say mind and body, exist, so do the relations exist in the substances. These two lilies exist, but so also does their resemblance in the possession of the same form. These things that constitute a cause are real, and also those which constitute the effect, but the power in the cause to produce the effect is also and equally a reality. 2. Man's knowledge begins not with relations, but with things. In laying down this proposition I undermine one of the most fatal, as I regard it, errors of the day. It is said that all man's knowledge is relative. I look on this as a mistake, logically and chronologically. Our consciousness being witness, we regard ourselves as having a knowledge of this thing and that thing, say of a brown horse, or of ourselves as perceiving it. Having got this knowledge, we may then compare two or more objects thus known and discover some connection between them, as that they are like each other, or that they differ from each other, or that the one attracts the other. We discover the relation because we so far know the things and perceive the relations to be in the things. This gives us a positive, as opposed to a relative theory of knowledge. Instead of saying that we know the relations of things themselves unknown, the correct statement is that we discover the relations of things known and discover the relations because we know the things. In this way, we avoid that most subtle skepticism of our day, which begins with the doctrine of relativity and ends with nescience or agnosticism. 3. It is wrong to maintain, as so many do in the present day, that the only relations which the mind can discover are those of agreement and difference. This is another of the ways in which sensationalists and positivists are narrowing the capacities of the human mind and undermining our belief in the reality of things. They first represent us as incapable of knowing things. Then they make the relations not to be in the things. Thirdly, they speak of agreements and differences as the only relations which the mind can discover. Having so limited human capacity, many are prepared to account for it by material agency, or simply by the action of powers unknown. But to discover that things agree or disagree, we must know something of the things. We must know some of the qualities of the things. Further, we discover more or less clearly what it is that they agree or disagree in. It must be in form or property, or something else known or conceived. End of section 23. Section 24 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Book 3, The Comparative Powers, Classification of Relations, Part 1. Chapter 2. Classification of Relations. We see a tree in full blossom. 1. We discover that this tree is the same as we saw yesterday, though the blossoms are further advanced. 2. We contemplate separately the blossoms, but as blossoms of the tree. 3. We notice that the tree resembles others standing near it. 4. We observe the shape and size of the tree. 5. We calculate how long the blossoms continue. 6. We try to estimate the number of blossoms. 7. We find that they emit a pleasant odour. 8. We discover that some are blown away by the wind. We thus find that the mind of man can perceive 8 kinds of relation. 1. Identity. 2. Whole and parts. 3. Resemblance. 4. Space. 5. Time. 6. Quantity. 7. Active property. 8. Cause and effect. I am sure that the mind can discover all these kinds of relations. Section 1. Relation of identity and difference. This relation carries us back to the simple cognitive powers. We have seen that we know objects without and within us as having being. The same object may be presented to us at different times, and it may be with different concomitants, and when we declare it to be the same, the judgment is one of identity. We have an immediate and direct means of knowing one kind of identity, and that is our personal identity. First, in every act of consciousness, we know self as having being. Again, in every act of memory, we have a remembrance of past self, and also a consciousness of present self, and on comparing them, we at once pronounce the two to be the same. There may have been many and varied differences between the two states. In the past state remembered, we may have been hopeful, elastic, joyous. In the latter, sad, depressed, gloomy. Yet we discern an essential self that is the same. All this is self-evident, that is, evident on the bare contemplation of the objects. It is necessary, we cannot be made to decide otherwise, or allow for an instant that we are different persons from what we were a month or a year or 10 years ago. It is also universal, that is, entertained by all men. We are thus entitled to regard it as intuitive, for it can stand the tests of intuition. We have no such direct means of knowing the identity of other and external things. I saw a man with a white coat yesterday, and I see a man with a black coat today. I have no intuitive means of knowing that it is the same man. I know, indeed, that everything we know has being, the thing we remembered in the past, and the thing perceived at present. But I have no intuitive means of knowing that they are the same. We are here thrown upon experience, which experience always falls back, however, upon the principle that everything has being. But it is by a gathered induction and inference that we are able to decide that this person or this table we now see is the same as that we saw yesterday. Hence, while there is no room for difference of judgment as to our personal identity, there is room for difference of opinion as to the identity of other things, and there are often mistakes and disputes as to the identity of persons. We have in these last cases to depend on the common rules of experiential evidence, taking care not to decide one way or other when we have no sufficient proof. The relation of identity is always one and the same, but it may take 3 distinct forms: identity proper, contradiction, and excluded middle. These were mixed up together and at times confounded in the ancient philosophy, in the medieval ages, and indeed till the present century, when they have been distinguished and carefully separated, greatly to the benefit both of logic and metaphysics. Identity proper. The same is the same. A is A. This proposition is apt to appear very trivial and even silly till we put it in this form. The same is the same. Observed, it may be in different circumstances or with different associations. I am sure that I am the same person today when I am in good humour as yesterday when I was angry. I discover that this man in robust health, florid and active, is the man I saw a year ago, pale, sallow, and listless. This same faculty guides us in all those judgments, affirmative, which are called immediate inferences, or derivative judgments. As, when it is given that all men have a conscience, we argue that the Indian has a conscience. It also regulates all cases, affirmative, in which from 2 premises we draw a conclusion. As, when it is given that he who is responsible has free will, and that man is responsible, we infer that man has free will. In such cases, the mind discovers an identity in thought in propositions which differ from each other in form, in language, and in extent. The principle of contradiction. Here, when we have a cognition or an idea of a thing, we are prepared to deny that it has not those qualities which it is regarded by us as possessing. As knowing that this body has a square shape, we deny that it is round. As, knowing what mammals are, we deny that they are not warm-blooded. Our negations, like our affirmations, thus carry us back to our knowledge and our ideas. The principle of contradiction has been expressed variously. One is, A cannot be not A. The best form, I think, is the old one so much used by the medieval logicians. It is impossible for the same thing to be and not to be at the same time. This principle applies both to things and their qualities. If I know that stone to exist, I cannot allow that it does not exist, and I must contradict those who so assert. Again, if I know that I have free will, I must deny that I have not free will. If I know that this body is extended, I put a negative on all asseverations that it is not extended. This principle regulates all propositions which draw a negative proposition by immediate inference. Thus, it being allowed that no man is infallible, we infer that the Pope and the public press are not infallible. It also rules reasoning in which the conclusion is negative. On being allowed that one who has not reason is not responsible, and that this man is without reason, we argue that he is not responsible. Excluded middle. When two propositions are contradictory, both cannot be true. If this man has free will, it cannot be that he has not free will. When the two propositions are truly contradictory, one or the other must be true. If John Smith did commit the robbery, it cannot be that he did not commit it. But it is to be observed that propositions may seem to be contradictory when they are not so, in which case they may both be true or both false. Thus man may be free, while yet causation acts in his voluntary acts. I may be able in one sense to conceive of space and time as unbounded, that is, I decide intellectually that they are so, and in another sense I am obliged by my nature to conceive of them, that is, image them, as being bounded. It has been shown by philosophic logicians that these three laws regulate all discursive thought. But it is to be noticed that discursive thought always implies something admitted on which it proceeds. All our immediate inferences and reasonings thus carry us back to our primitive cognitions, beliefs, and admitted judgments. Section 2. Relation of whole and parts. When we consider the relation of the whole to the parts, this is comprehension. When we consider the relation of a part to the whole, this is abstraction. When we separate the whole into its parts, supposed to be its whole parts, this is analysis. When we put the parts together to make up the whole, this is synthesis. These are operations which every one is performing every day. In their higher forms they act an important part in science of every kind. In the ordinary affairs of life, we have ever to break down the concrete or complex whole into its parts, to contemplate and use separately what we have seen together, and to combine things in order to make up a connected whole. To combine, for example, the separate sides and rooms of a house to make up our idea of the house. We are ever required to consider the attributes of things, as well as the things themselves. In a loose way, we are ever distributing things into compartments and putting together the compartments to make a complete conception. Required even in practical matters, these are essential processes in every kind of scientific investigation. In nature, different agencies are so mixed together that if we would ascertain their mode of operation, we must separate them. Inductive science, says Bacon, begins with the necessary rejections and exclusions, or, as Whewell expresses it, with the decomposition of facts. Abstraction is necessary in order to our thinking of, or inquiring into, any attribute, quality, or law. Analysis must be constantly employed in every kind of investigation, physical or metaphysical. It is equally true that in all scientific inquiry we ever aim at reaching a synthesis of the things we have considered separately. Section 3. Relation of resemblance. In our observation of this relation, as of every other, we proceed on our knowledge or idea, previous or present, of objects. From the knowledge or idea we have of them, we perceive that there are points in which they are alike. This enables us to put them into a class, to which we may attach a name. That class must include all the objects possessing the common attributes fixed on. By the faculty which discovers whole and parts, we get, as we have seen, our abstract notions. By the faculty which discovers relations of resemblance, we get our general notions or concepts. These two kinds of notions are not to be confounded. By abstraction we have an idea of an attribute. In our general notions we put things together that have a common quality. From this it appears that abstraction, which fixes on the common attribute, is necessary to generalization. It has to be added that after general notions have been formed, we can compare them and form higher and more complex concepts. 1. It should be noticed that in all cases generalization proceeds on common properties supposed to be in the things. The concepts are no doubt formed by the mind, but they are formed from things known or apprehended. When the things are imaginary, of course the notions may also be imaginary, but when the things are real, the concept has also a reality. That is, a reality in the common properties possessed by all the objects embraced in the class. 2. The human intellect, by its native tendency, is ever led to seek out points of resemblance among the objects which fall under its notice. As the singular objects pressing themselves on our attention are innumerable, and would be a burden on the memory were it obliged to carry them all, so we are compelled to form them into classes, were it only to enable us to bear them about with us more readily. While they and their properties are so numerous, they all proceed from a few elements, each with a few qualities, and so we are everywhere presented with likenesses which the mind is not slow to observe. Some of these are superficial and accidental, having no importance in the arrangement of the objects in the world, but others have a deep significance as proceeding from some universally acting cause, or falling out according to a law in which there is a divine purpose. These furnish us with the means of arranging natural objects into what may be called natural classes, into species and genera, orders and kingdoms, which have a deep meaning, and open to our view the nature of the order that pervades the universe. 3. It is of importance to distinguish between the relation of identity and that of likeness. In the one there is a sameness in that which constitutes the being of a thing, in the other in one or more of its qualities. Section 4. Relations of space. We can discover these because we have a knowledge of objects, say our own bodily frames and bodies in contact with them as extended, that is, occupying space. We are now able to compare bodies in respect of the space which they occupy, and thus determine their form and size, linear, superficial, and solid. By this gift of locality, as it may be called, we are able to estimate the distance and the bulk of objects, and to determine what they are as we meet them, say man or woman, boy or girl, horse or cow, tree or rock, river or mountain, often at a great distance. In all such cases we seem to settle on a unit of some kind, of shape or distance, and to fix on a line of direction, say in a straight line from our eye or ear, and to bring all things into a relation to these. The skilful and practised eye, or rather mind acting through the eye, may attain a wonderful accuracy, apart from the use of any instrument, in determining these special relations. By a process of abstraction, we can separate the space from the bodies in space, and then discover the relations of pure space. This is what is done in geometry. We define the things we are to look at, line, surface, triangle, square, circle, and then proceed to compare the things defined. Some of the truths we discover by pure intuition, that is, by the bare contemplation of the figures. Thus, on considering two parallel lines, we declare that they will never meet. In other cases, we cannot discover the relation directly, and we resort to mediate reasoning. We have found that A equals B, and B equals C, and we conclude that A equals C. We do not require any enunciated general rule to enable us to do so. We so conclude at once on the bare contemplation of the objects. But then some good purposes are served by expressing in a general form the principle on which we have proceeded, which is, things which are equal to the same thing are equal to one another. This may now be announced as an axiom regulating our reasonings. A corollary is a truth derived at once from some truth we have demonstrated. Section 5. The relations of time. We can discover these because we have already, by memory, have an apprehension of events as happening in time. These relations are not so numerous as those of space, but are of equal importance. They may be summed up under three heads: contemporaneous, prior, and posterior. Here, as in regard to space, we have to take a unit of comparison, a second, a minute, an hour, a year, a century, and estimate all things by it. The digits give us our decimal units, and the seasons the yearly units. Great events, such as the Jewish Passover, the institution of the Olympic Games, the birth of Christ, the flight of Muhammad, give our starting points in historical chronology. The fossils with the minerals give us the epochs in geology. By such means we can go far back into the past, and by reasoning from the past, look far forward into the future. Section 6. Relations of quantity. These are the relations of less or more, of degree of proportion. We can discover these because we have had objects before us with bulk and events running through time, and also because we have discovered relations between these, such as relations of space and time, and it may be all other relations. Having discovered objects and relations, we can find that they have less or more of the qualities we have fixed on, and specify the proportion between the qualities. In the practical affairs of life, this capacity keeps things in their proper place, calls forth our acts at the suitable time, imparts a unity and a consistency to the conduct, and makes things march in harmony. This is specially the mathematical talent. In geometry, indeed, the relations of space are the main ones looked at. In arithmetic, we may have to use the units supplied by time. But ever since Descartes showed that the relations of space could be expressed quantitatively, mathematics, as a science, may be represented as the science of quantity and as dealing with the relations of quantity. It is of importance to show that the relation of equality is not the same as that of identity or as that of resemblance. In the judgments of identity, we declare the objects to be the same. In those of resemblance, we proclaim them to have like qualities. But in equality, we declare them to be the same in point of quantity. When we declare that A equals 6, or that A resembles B, we do not affirm the things to be identical or that they are like, but that they are equal. By applying these distinctions, we are able to correct a mistake which certain mathematicians are seeking to introduce into logic. They interpret the proposition, all men are mortal, as meaning all men equal some mortals. Now this is to misunderstand and pervert the proposition which, when properly interpreted, means that all men have the attribute of mortality, a proposition in comprehension, whole or parts, and the involved proposition in extension, that is resemblance. All men are included in the class of mortals. End of section 24. Section 25 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Book 3, The Comparative Powers, Classification of Relations, Part 2. Section 7, Relations of Active Power or Property. We are able to know these relations because we know objects without and within us as exercising power. We know body as having potency probably by all the senses. We seem to have a perception of body, affecting us even by smell, taste, feeling, hearing, and vision. Certainly we have it by the muscular sense. It is palpably wrong to assert, as some do, that body is altogether passive. There is a sense, it should be admitted, in which body is passive. If left isolated and alone, it will not act. It will continue in the state in which it is. But every body is acted on by other bodies. It is attracted by them or chemically affected by them. It acts and is acted on. It moves and is changed. All action of bodies is mutual action. One body acts on another, and the other acts on it. In respect of their active powers, bodies have various relations to each other, which we can discover and express. Physical science consists essentially in the discovery of the relations of bodies to each other, which are expressed in laws, mechanical, chemical, vital. It is generally acknowledged that mind has power. I think I see proof that body acts on mind and mind on body. An action of the nerves and brain gives rise to perception. I will to move my arm, and it moves. There is always much mystery about the relations, that is, mutual actions of mind and body. Still, some points have been determined as to the relation of mind and the cerebrospinal mass, and hundreds are eagerly employed in seeking to make further discoveries. We certainly know much speculatively and practically as to the activity of mind and the laws which govern it. From the days of Aristotle there has been a science of mind, and it has made considerable progress in modern times. This treatise is professedly an endeavour to discover the powers of the mind and the relations between them. In the business of life and the intercourse of mankind, one man seeks to sway his neighbour by working upon what he knows of the motives by which he is swayed. Section 8. Relation of cause and effect. Causation may be considered objectively and subjectively. Under the former aspect, we regard it as acting independently of our observation or any observation of it. A spark will kindle gunpowder, whether we notice it or not. Under the latter, we contemplate the mind looking at it, or, in other words, we inquire what is the nature of the exercise or power which discovers the relation. 1. Causation objective. Much remains to be settled as to what causation is. How does force stand related to cause? How are properties related to cause when it is said that mind and matter are known by their properties? What is the difference between power in mind and power in matter? Some points seem to me to be determined, and these may in the end determine the others. First, there is an energy in all physical nature. It is acknowledged that there is a conservation of energy. Spencer calls it persistence of force. Physicists distinguish between potential and real energy. Aristotle's distinction between dynamis and energia. The former cannot be increased or diminished by any mundane agency, by any power but that of God, to whom in the end all power belongeth. All the physical forces, mechanical, chemical, electric, magnetic, some think the vital also, are correlated and can be transmuted into one another, so much chemical and electric power being an equivalent of so much mechanical energy. This power is always in body, but may be transferred from body to body according to the capacities of the body. Thus a ball A in motion strikes a ball B at rest, and the power in A is transferred to B, which moves while A now rests. It should be observed that while the amount of energy in each body has changed, the whole amount of energy continues the same. I believe the capacity for energy in the body also continues the same, and it is possible to reverse the action and make B in motion strike A at rest and transfer its motion to it. Every body has a certain capacity, dynamis, for receiving this power, and this power in exercise constitutes the properties of the body, its gravitating, chemical, electric, magnetic, and, it may be, vital properties. As to mental properties, say intelligence, emotion, moral approbation, will, there is no reason to believe that they are correlated with physical powers. It is the office of psychology to determine their nature, their extent, and their limits. In doing this, it labours under the disadvantage of not having a precise standard of measurement, as mechanics have in foot-pounds, but it has a counteracting advantage in the acts being under the immediate cognizance of the consciousness. Secondly, another important point has been established. John S. Mill has shown that there are always two or more agents in a cause, physical. We are accustomed to say that this plant was killed by the frost, but there is more embraced in the cause than the frost, that is, than the low state of the atmosphere. That agency alone would not have produced the effect. In the cause we have to include the state of the plant. The frost might not have destroyed the plant if it had not been tender. The low temperature and the tenderness of the plant together constitute the cause, and were necessary to cause the effect. Carrying out the same views a step farther, I have been endeavouring to show that not only is there a duality or plurality in the cause, there is the same in the effect. There is a change in the plant, but there is also a change produced, difficult to measure, in the temperature of the atmosphere. It is the same in all cases, two or more agents acting as the cause, and the same agents changed in the effect. A ball A strikes a ball B, both balls act, and both balls are acted on and are changed, the one losing momentum, the other gaining it. There is thus a most complicated agency in causation, and a like complication in effectuation. How numerous the agencies producing any given historical event. On the supposition that the wolf suckled Romulus, we may trace the influence on the whole history of the Roman people. Certainly the character of Knox has so far influenced the Scottish character in all later ages. The Puritan character of the 17th century and the Pilgrim Fathers, modified by very different influences, has helped to mould the people of New England. In the common explanations, one of the agents, the more prominent one, or that supposed to be the main one, is spoken of as the cause. The others are described as the conditions, or the occasions. It was on the occasion of this man being exposed to cold that he caught fever and died. We commonly look only to one part of the complex consequence, the one most prominent or the one expected as the effect, and we call the others incidents or concomitants. We say that the flood refreshed the ground, but incidentally or accidentally it also drowned a certain person. But rigidly speaking, there is no chance in what is occurring, no accident in what has taken place. All the agents acting are to be included in the cause, and are also to be seen in the effect. They constitute the invariable antecedent which has produced the effect, and which, when it recurs, will forever produce the effect. The same effect precisely will follow when they are all present. Cause and effect do not consist, as Hume maintains, in invariable antecedents and consequence. In the cause, that is, in the agents forming the cause, there is power, force, or energy to produce the effect. It is not the invariable antecedents which makes the cause, but the cause which makes the invariable antecedents. All power, we have seen, resides in a substance. Let us suppose, as we have done, that every substance is endowed with its own capacity or property. Then, the substances continuing the same, there must always be the same amount of energy in the world, a conservation of energy, a persistence of force, as it is called. The grand doctrine of our day, of the conservation of energy, seems to follow from these principles. Causation subjective. This falls under psychology. This relation, like every other, throws us back on our primitive cognitions. We know mind by self-consciousness and body by sense-perception, as possessing power to produce an effect. Our earliest knowledge of mind and our earliest knowledge of matter is thus associated with efficiency. Herbert Spencer may be right in representing force as the most essential quality of body as made known to us. It is certainly known as early and directly as extension, commonly regarded, and I believe justly, as one of the essential qualities of body. It may be by resistance, that is, force from a surface, that extension is first made known to us by the touch and by the rods in the eye. Power is more fully revealed to us in the exercise of mental properties, and we regard it as an essential quality of mind. We trace everything that occurs to a power in a substance producing it. This is a primitive perception. It is self-evident, evident in the thing itself as we know it. It is necessary, we cannot be made to think or believe otherwise. It is a universal perception. Children act upon the conviction as soon as they begin to act intelligently. They follow the light which they find produces the pleasant impression on their eye. Savages, even the lowest in the scale, act upon it, and expect the same effect to follow the same cause. Not that they are able, like a metaphysician, to enunciate the law, but upon the bare inspection of the object before them, they form a decision and act upon it. It is after careful introspection and reflection that we are able to detect the precise nature of the law and to formulate it. The law is not, as most people who have not thought much on the subject are disposed to say, that everything has a cause. If this were the law, there would be no first cause, and we would require to seek for a cause of God himself. Our primary knowledge of power is a new thing produced. We instinctively seek for a cause only for a new object or a new manifestation of an old object. The true expression of the law is that whatever begins to be has a cause. This is to our minds a fundamental law at the basis of all action. While our primary conviction as to cause and effect is intuitive, yet much of the knowledge which we have of actual causes and effects is the result of a gathered induction. It is only by careful observation that we know the nature of particular powers, such as gravitation, chemical affinity, electricity. It is by careful weighing and measuring that we know what are the powers in any one bodily object, say what is its weight, or its chemical affinity towards any other body. But believing that every material object has power, we are prompted to find what are the extent and the limits of that power. We see that intuitive conviction, so far from restricting experimental investigation or rendering it unnecessary, is the main means of inducing us to engage in it. For while it does not reveal the cause, it constrains us to believe that there is a cause, which we therefore inquire after. It should be noticed that the belief in the relation of cause and effect is not the same as the belief in the uniformity of nature. These two have often been confounded. Though connected, they are essentially different. The former is intuitive and universal. The latter is a discovery of science and is not universally believed in. The child and the savage always look for a cause to every phenomenon in which they are interested, but they have no special faith in the uniformity of nature. Till lengthened observation, till, in fact, advanced science, teaches them, they are quite ready to believe that nature, so far from being under law, is acted on by various supernatural agencies, and is under agencies always acting causally, but in no rigid order. It is only as people advance in knowledge that they discover that all events obey laws narrower or wider. It is only within the last few ages that the uniformity of nature has been established as a scientific truth. But we have here to do not with the uniformity of nature, but with causation as a law of mind. According to the account given above, causation is always in objects, material or mental, all of which possess power. As there is reality in objects, material and mental, there is reality in the powers and in their causal relation by means of these powers. The cause of a known effect is not superinduced upon the objects by the mind, as Kant holds. It is perceived as in the objects and in the nature of the objects. We are thus in a real world not only in regard to objects, but in regard to all their action, which is indeed an essential part of their nature. These coal strata which we see in the earth are a reality, and we argue from them that the deposited plants which formed them millions of years ago are also realities. By a like reasoning process, we discover these adaptations in the eye and ear so wonderful, we seek for a cause which is also real in the designing mind of the living and true God. But while all this is true, there may be limitations to the truth. We know power to be both in mind and body and in their very nature, but it does not follow that every act is one of causation and necessary causation. As a matter of fact, we have a peculiar consciousness as to acts of the will when we choose this and reject that, when, for example, we resist the evil and choose the good. Because we believe in a cause behind every other action of body and mind, I am not sure that we are required to seek for a causal power behind these free acts of the will, or at least that this causal power is of the same kind as operates so sternly in every other part of nature. There may be an outlet here for free will in perfect consistency with the universal prevalence of causation in all other parts of nature, including all other mental states, intellectual and emotional. I do not claim that in this way we can clear up all the mystery which broods like a cloud over the point at which free will and causation meet, but we have shown that there is a place where free will may act in perfect consistency with all that we know of causation, thus allowing our consciousness to give its testimony in favour of free will, without interfering with the dicta of any other part of our nature. The subject will be resumed when we come to speak of the will in a subsequent volume. End of section 25.
Section 26 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers, by James McCosh. Book 3rd, The Comparative Powers. By these we proceed from something given or allowed to something else derived from it by the simple exercises of thought directed to the objects. They are commonly represented as being simple apprehension, judgment, and reasoning. These are all performed by the comparative powers, specially by 3 of them: the faculties which discover the relations of identity, comprehension, and resemblance. 1. Simple apprehension, the product of which is the notion. There are 3 kinds of notions: the singular, the abstract, and the general concept. The singular notion is given us originally by the simple cognitive faculties of sense perception and self-consciousness. Upon this we may perform discursive processes and still keep it singular. Thus, Socrates is a singular term, which we are enabled to apprehend because we know ourselves by the 2 original inlets of knowledge. This man is also a singular term, though we have performed an intellectual process and referred the individual to the class man. In the singular notion, there is no exercise of the comparative powers. It comes into logic simply among the things given or allowed, and not among the processes. The abstract notion is formed by what we may call the power of comprehension. It is the notion of an attribute. The general notion or concept is the product of the faculty of resemblance. It is the notion of objects joined by their possessing common attributes. 2. Judgment. In this we compare notions with the view of declaring their agreement or disagreement in a proposition, affirmative or negative. Our judgments proceed on our notions, and our singular notions carry us back to our primitive cognitions and beliefs, and our abstract and general notions imply previous acts of comparison involving previous cognitions or ideas. Our judgments passed on notions have thus a reference to things or imaginations formed out of things. Our judgments may be of three kinds. They may declare an identity, as when we say, metaphysics is the science of first principles, logic is the science of the laws of discursive thought. Or they may be judgments of comprehension, as when we say, the dog barks, where we make barking an attribute of the dog. Or it may be one of extension, that is, of classes or general notions. Thus we may interpret the last example as meaning dogs are in the class of barking animals. 3. Reasoning. It is acknowledged that this is a form of judgment in which we have three notions instead of two, and compare two notions by means of a third. The New Zealander, as he has the power of speech, is a man. Here we compare New Zealander and man by means of possessing the power of speech. We have already seen that the principle of identity regulates many of our ratiocinations. So far as reasoning in extension, the reasoning treated in the common logical treatises, is concerned, the principle of resemblance is involved, the resemblance of the objects in the concepts. The horse, being a mammal, is warm-blooded. Here, we place horse in the class mammal, and therefore in the class of warm-blooded animals. There may also be reasoning in comprehension, in which we look to the attribute. As when we say, this man, having intelligence, conscience, and free will, is responsible, where it is argued that the attributes of intelligence, conscience, and freedom, involving responsibility, man as possessing these, must be responsible. Reasoning in comprehension may always be translated into reasoning in extension. Logic does not, everyone now acknowledges, give us the power of reasoning or discursive thought. It simply expounds the process involved. We think and reason spontaneously, then reflect upon what has passed in our minds, and may express the operation in formal laws. It follows that if we have given the proper account of the logical laws, we have unfolded the laws of our ordinary processes of thinking from day to day in the common affairs of life. Every man is exercising continually the faculties which have just passed under our notice, and what psychology does is to unfold the nature of these faculties, while it is the function of logic to formulate them into laws by which we may test discursive thought, may justify the truth, and expose the error. End of section 26. Section 27 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Book 3rd. Intuition in the Discovery of Relations. I have been showing in this work that there is intuition, that is, the immediate perception of objects, both by the senses and self-consciousness. According to the school of Kant, there is no other intuition than that of sense, external and internal, and all beyond is subjective and formed by the mind. It is a curious circumstance that, according to Locke, there is no intuition of sense, there is only one of judgment, that is, the perception of the immediate agreement or disagreement of our ideas. I regard both these views as so far erroneous. We have intuition of body without and self within, but this is not, as Kant holds, of mere phenomena in the sense of appearances, but of things, of body as extended and resisting energy, and of self as thinking or feeling in some particular mode. But there is also a sense, and an important one, in which we have also an intuition of relations. We first perceive things, and then also the relation of things, and some of these may be known by intuition. We know matter as existing, but we also know, and this directly, that it has relation to other things known, that it is in space, and that there is causation in its action. We also know mind as existing, and we know it to have potency, spirituality, thinking, and relations to things. Most important consequences follow. We not only know things, such as body and mind, but things perceived in them and in relation to them to be realities, and both alike realities. We know mind as having extension, and we know mind as thinking, say as contemplating extension, and we know the one as well as the other with immediate certainty. I hold that as the things are real, so the relations in the things are also real. In holding this doctrine, we save ourselves at once from the idealism of Locke and the a priori forms of Kant. They are in error who hold that all knowledge is relative, that is, only of the relations of things themselves unknown. And they are equally in error who affirm that relations are forms added to things by the mind. The relations are in the things, and are as real as the things, only with a somewhat different kind of reality, a sort of dependent reality in the things. True, we only know individual things by the senses, but we know by contemplating them that they have relations. In this way, we reach a realization according to which the mind knows things and their connections. End of section 27. Section 28 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers, by James McCosh. Book 3rd, The Comparative Powers, General Remarks on the Comparative Powers. 1. These faculties are in all men, not merely in certain individuals, times, or nations, but the properties of humanity. They are found in a rudimentary condition in children and in idiots, in the former to be developed. Madmen often display them in an intense form. 2. They constitute the highest of the intellectual powers. I may show that the moral are higher. They carry us out the farthest, and they raise us up the highest. They enable us to connect all things we know with one another, and they take us as far out as the connections reach. Thus, causation takes us as far back as the millions of geographical ages, and as far forward as the causes now in operation go. Show us, for instance, that this world is to be burned with fire. 3. In their exercise, they have risen very much above the senses, and the need of the cooperation of the senses, and of the bodily frame generally. True, they have been dependent on these for the material on which they have to pronounce a judgment, but the judgments themselves are purely mental. Hence we often find that in old age, when the senses, the memory, and the informing faculties are breaking down, the judgment is as sound as ever, and fails only when a proper statement of facts is not given it. 4. They have all a tendency to operate and seek out for the appropriate objects, allured by the numerous relations which may be discovered in them. Thus we have pleasure in finding an essential sameness in the midst of minor diversities. We love to visit a locality with which we were familiar in former days, and to trace the identity in the hills and valleys, so changed in the houses upon them, and the people dwelling in them. We are interested in the lights and shadows of the landscapes, and the varying aspects of the sea and sky. We set ourselves keenly to detect an old friend whom age has changed. We analyze the bodies in nature, and seek to solve the difficult problems in science and philosophy. We love to resolve a complex whole into its component parts, and to understand thereby the whole of which they form a part. And we feel as if we know a thing only when we are acquainted with its constituents. We delight to trace the likenesses among objects, and to discover the analogies between things often far removed from each other, and which bind in a unity all parts of nature and of history. We find it pleasant, as well as profitable, to observe how plants and animals are after a type, how the heavenly bodies move in like curves, elliptical or spiral, and how occurrences, historical and cosmic, move on in epochs. The idea was anticipated by Pythagoras, and has been established in modern times, that physical laws such as gravity and chemical affinity take a quantitative expression. We like to see activity in the breeze, in the running stream, in the leaping cataract, in the rippled ocean, in the perpetual motion and prattle of boys and girls, in the contests of wit, and in the Demosthenic torrent of eloquence. All lofty minds delight to follow effect to cause, and cause to prior cause, and on to the great originating cause, from whom all things proceed. 5. Our comparative faculties are admirably suited to the state of things in which we are placed. I can conceive of a world in which there is no such adaptation, in which the relations which we are inclined to notice have no correspondences in what falls under our eyes. There might thus have been an inscription without the means of deciphering it, or a writing without an interpretation. But we find instead that we live in a world in which there is a beautiful harmony between the eye that looks and the forms and colors which it gazes on. We feel security in falling back with the Eleatics from the phenomenal variations revealed by the senses upon the permanent to-on, revealed to the intellect as a noumenon, and having a correspondence in the permanent mind, and the conservation of energy in matter. Our analytical propensity is rewarded in discovering that complexities can be resolved into their elements. Our inclination to generalize is encouraged by finding that organic objects can be arranged into species, orders, and kingdoms. We rejoice when, in accordance with our anticipations, we find all nature conform to laws of time, figure, and proportion. We are moved by the movements of nature in heaven above, and the earth beneath, in the rapidity of molecules, and the quickness of thought. We pursue eagerly one act to a previous one, and are stayed only when we rest on one unchangeable substance. The consequence of all this is that instead of being strangers, wanderers, or outcasts in the world in which we are placed, we are, as it were, among friends, with a friend who is the bond of union among them all. 6. There is a correspondence between the subjective and objective worlds, between the thinking mind and the objects it is called to think on. This does not arise, as the ancient Eleatics and modern pantheists maintain, from the unity of thought and being, for we have as clear proof of the difference of mind and matter as we have of their connection. Nor can it spring solely or even mainly from the two having acted on each other for indefinite ages and become adjusted, as Herbert Spencer accounts for their relation. No doubt their connection may have influenced both. Thus, the contemplation of the action of matter by mind may have created tendencies in the mind, but to produce this fruit, there must have been an original marriage union. In another department of nature, we are prepared to acknowledge that the rays of light have not produced the eye, nor the eye the rays of light, though they have so far brought each other into conformity. So neither does the subjective mind create objective matter, nor objective matter create the properties of mind. We are thus driven to the conclusion that there must have been a foreordained conformity between them. We have thus the true doctrine of pre-established harmony between mind and body, of which Leibniz had, after all, only imperfect glimpses. Not a harmony of the two acting apart, but of the one acting upon and with the other. 7. We have seen that there is an intimate connection between our associations and the discovery of relations, and have illustrated this by resemblance and contrast. But the remark holds true of all relations. For every relation discovered, there is a ground, and this may become the bond of an association, which strengthens and enlarges that of contiguity. 1. On seeing a man in one dress today, we think of him in the other dress in which we saw him yesterday, the man himself being the same in both. 2. On the leg of a table being seen by us, the idea of the whole table is apt to come up. 3. We have already discussed resemblance. 4. Certain relations of triangles suggest other relations to the mathematician, also of triangles. Stratford and Shakespeare suggest each other because of the birth there of the great poet. 5. The year 1790 is apt to bring up both the French and American revolutions, in both there being revolution about the same time. 6. The proportions of one figure recall those of another. 7. The activity of some one thing, such as life, calls up the activity of other things, such as the wind. 8. The view we have given of physical causation, that it consists of two or more agents in the cause, to be found in a charged state in the effect, enables us to see how the common qualities in the one should call up the other. In all cases, the powers in the substance acting in the effect suggest the powers acting in the cause. It may be with their adjuncts, and vice versa. Associations in all cases imply a contiguity, but in the highest forms, correlative associations are strengthened and enlarged by the discovery of relations. I may add that a man's intellectual wealth is large in proportion to the formed coins and cut diamonds which he has laid up in correlations. Without many and varied connections, there can be no readiness or comprehensiveness of memory, such as is to be found in our greater men. With such accumulated riches, a man is ready to expend bounty of thought wherever he goes. 8. The comparative faculties differ widely in the case of different individuals. This may arise from the intensity of the original cognition, or the strength of the comparative faculty, from one or from both. In some cases, it looks as if it were the original impression, say of form or color or incident, which is so keen that it penetrates into us. In other cases, it looks as if it were a strong intellectual energy seeking for relations. It is evident that there are native tastes and talents. The two commonly go together, the taste calling the talent into exercise, and the talent forming and evoking the taste, and both seeking out fitting objects. When these are very marked, they commonly determine the decision of the youth as to his pursuits, his vocation, his business, his profession, his literary or scientific studies. It is true that circumstances often have a swaying influence, in fact, compel a settlement. But in most youths of any force of character, there is a natural ability or inclination which selects his life for him, and this frequently not in concurrence with outward position, but in opposition to it. If a man, for instance, has a taste for some particular pursuit, he will be found pursuing it in his vacant hours when obliged to engage habitually in far different work. How often is the merchant or lawyer longing for a leisure day or week to enable him to examine the forms of plants, and rushing forth whenever the pressure of business allows into the midst of the beauties of nature? How often does a minister of religion, busy for most of the week in caring for his flock, find an idle day or evening in which to pursue philosophic speculation? It is thus clear that one man may have a strong tendency to observe one kind of relation, and another a different kind. It is always to be remembered, however, that the same natural talent may be exercised on different objects, and it is here that external circumstances may have a modifying influence. It may be mere accident which determines a man with a certain taste to betake himself to the study of plants or animals, or to painting or sculpture. It is also to be borne in mind that some pursuits require the exercise of more than one faculty, and it is only when there is the necessary combination that the qualification for the particular work is secured. But making the needful allowances, it will be found that, while in a few there is a universal ability, and in the great body of mankind there is a moderate degree of various talents, in some there are peculiar gifts which will and ought to find congenial pursuits, and thus determine their destiny. It is a most happy thing when a youth comes to know what are his peculiar qualifications, and is enabled to put them to proper use. It is a blessed thing when a man with marked endowments is led to consecrate them to a high end. 9. All the relations enumerated, with one exception, are to be found in mental as well as in material objects. That one is the relation of space. We cannot correlate by it our ideas and emotions. We arrange bodies according to type, but we cannot thus distribute or even conceive of our mental states. The reason is obvious. Consciousness as a faculty of intuitive cognition does not make known to us our mental states as occupying space, and as extension does not appear in the primitive knowledge, so it does not reappear in the discovery of relations. This might be urged as an argument of some force in favor of the immateriality of the soul. We cannot conceive mental, as we do physical facts, under spatial relations. 10. I need not dwell at the close on the means of training the powers, for I have been illustrating them throughout. It is enough to exhort every young man to let none of these intellectual faculties lie dormant, or yield to the temptation to satisfy himself with sensations, feelings, and passions. End of section 28.
Section number 29 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by John Fiore. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Conclusion: Rise of our Ideas. We have traced the powers of intelligence from the lowest to the highest, and have shown how our cognitions and ideas arise. From every separate faculty, as they have been arranged, we get one or more of these. We receive knowledge, probably our primary, from the senses. We thus come to know body and its modifications, especially its essential qualities, extension and resisting force. We thus get our idea of space. A large school, the sensationalists, maintain that we get all our ideas from sensation. This is a fundamental mistake. We have other and higher sources of knowledge. we get cognitions and ideas from self-consciousness, the knowledge of self in its many and varied modes, as I have been endeavoring to unfold them, as knowledge, conscience, feeling, and will. It is true that a full and distinct knowledge of self, of the ego, is a late acquisition, but from birth there is a knowledge of self in all our acts. Locke held that we get all our ideas from sensation and reflection. This is likewise a mistake. From these two, we get our ideas of existing things, bodily and spiritual. But in the exercise of the powers as we contemplate things, we get other ideas, such as the idea of time. When we reflect on the past and the infinite, as we go out in thought and conceive more and more, and yet are sure that we have not come to the end, and that what we thus believe in is perfect, and nothing can be added to it. In these exercises, faith is at work from the beginning, and we have a conviction of the reality of things not perceived by the senses, external or internal. By comparison, we discover the relations of things, discover universal interdependence, and extend our knowledge indefinitely, upward and downward, and all around, and still are among realities. When we come to speak of the motive powers, we may show that we get other ideas from them, as good and evil, as obligation, the imperative, from conscience, the lovely and unlovely from emotions, and choice and freedom from the will. The scattered rays may combine to form the pure white light, that is, the idea of the all-powerful and good God. Rise of ideas in the minds of children. A number of able men in various countries are engaged in this investigation and have given us some interesting results. Only they may find some deeper ideas in the mind than they have yet brought out to view. It is evident that while some acts of newborn babes are simply reflex or instinctive, the result of heredity, the cognitive powers begin to work from the time of birth, if they do not, as I think, work before. We give some statements from Darwin's biographical sketch of an infant. The infant's eyes were fixed on a candle as early as the 9th day. Long before he was 40 days old, he could move his hands to his own mouth. When nearly 4 months old, and perhaps much earlier, from the manner in which the blood rushed into his face, it was evident that he easily got into a violent passion. When 45 days old, he was observed to smile. After more than a year, he spontaneously exhibited affection by kissing his nurse. At the age of 6 months and 11 days, he showed sympathy by his melancholy face when his nurse pretended to cry. When 4 1/2 months old, he smiled at his image in a mirror, and in 2 months more, knew what the mirror was. Before he was a year old, he understood intonations and gestures, as well as several words and short sentences. F. H. Champney's Mind, Volume 6, speaks of an infant. His eyes were fixed on a candle when he was a week old. On the 14th day, he took notice of persons and moving objects. Smiling was reported at 5 1/2 weeks, tears 2 days before the end of the 14th week. Professor Stanley Hall is engaged in important inquiries as to the knowledge and ignorance of children at school age. Some ideas, it is evident, cannot rise till there is a gathering of experience, and until relations have been discovered between things. Comparison cannot work till there are things known to compare. But within a short time after birth, the intuitive principle of cause and effect seems to work, and the infant anticipates the return of the pleasant light that so attracted it. There can be little associative power exercised till ideas have come up according to the associations of contiguity and correlation, and infants, in consequence, have little control over their trains of thought. Children have no knowledge, originally, of distance, but come to grasp at objects in less than a year from their birth. A pleasure from the perception of beauty of colors appears in children as soon as they apprehend objects, and gradually rises to higher forms. In childhood and onward, as soon as objects are apprehended, there is a seeking for connections. Will, as a natural gift, operates like intellect, from birth, but at first there is little knowledge of objects on which to work. The use of signs in thinking is found in children long before they are a year old, as, for instance, the sound of a bell announcing that supper is ready. I believe that even the mature man cannot form an adequate idea of infinity, but I agree with such profound thinkers as Anselm, Descartes, and Leibniz in thinking that all have it in the germ. I think I have perceived it budding in children of 2 years. The mind is ever stretching beyond the now and the present. I remember distinctly of musing, when under 12 years, on the mysteries involved, and losing myself not unpleasantly in the contemplation. Moral perceptions cannot appear till there is a knowledge of other beings to whom we owe duties. But conscience and affection come forth, of course, in a low form, before the intelligent child has completed his first year. The dim idea of a power beyond the visible appears before school age, and may be exalted by teaching to a belief in gods, or in one God. It may have been observed that throughout this work it has been loosely applied that at the basis of the operation of all the faculties there are fundamental truths. The tests of these can be given. They are, first, self-evidence, or evidence seen at once in the very thing. Secondly, as following from the first, there is necessity. We cannot be made to think or believe otherwise. Thirdly, and confirmatory of the other two, there is catholicity, or universal consent. The exposition of these carries us beyond inductive psychology into metaphysics, or the science of first principles. Footnote: these principles are unfolded in my work on The Intuitions of the Mind Inductively Investigated. End footnote. End of section number 29. Read by John Fiore in Chester Springs on the 25th of June, 2024. End of Psychology, The Cognitive Powers by James McCosh.